After e4, e5 and knight to f3, the usual response from the black side is the classical, which is knight to c6, or the other defense is the Petrov defense. But there is a third alternative, and that starts with the move d6, and this is known as a Philidor defense. Eventually, Philidor defense lost its popularity because of the very dangerous central attack by the white, and that starts with the move d4. You can see I have highlighted by the arrows over here. Black has few options, but amongst them, e captures d4 leads to a very passive position for black, and same can be said by knight to f6, which can be easily met by d captures e4. So other two moves need to be considered, and the first move I like to consider over here is knight to d7, and this is probably the starting point of the Philidor defense. Well, here there are few moves, but the best move from the white perspective is bishop to c4, and it contains lots of tricks. Once again, black has few options, but believe it or not, they all leads to a very miserable position, and it's a great fun to watch all of them. So let's see each by turn. First move I want to consider is knight g to f6. So nature looking move, developing a kingside piece, but once again it leads to a disaster after d captures e5. Here black has three options, but all leads to worst position for black. If d captures e5, then after very simple knight to g5, black has a huge problem defending the f7, and I don't think so there's any satisfactory way to defend this pawn. So that's not good. If knight captures e4, then after queen to d5, black is in a great danger of losing a piece, because not only white is threatening to capture this knight, but white is also threatening to mate black on f7. So black has to more or less forget about the piece and try to defend the f7. And the third option, which is knight captures e5, once again leads to favorable position for white. So here white will continue with knight captures knight, and after d captures knight, white will give this wonderful check, which is bishop cross f7, and black king will capture this bishop. For a glance, it looks like white gained the queen of the black, but after the whole sequence, which is bishop check, and there's a discord attack to the queen, so queen has to drop back to d2, and after bishop captures queen and knight captures, after the whole transaction, white emerged with a clear pawn up and a better position. So that means at this position, knight g to f6 is prohibited. Let's look at another move, which is bishop to e7. After bishop to e7, once again white will capture the e5 pawn, and black has two options. If d captures e5, then after queen to d5, once again black is having some problem on the f7 square, and the only way to defend this square is by playing knight to h6, which can be easily made by bishop captures h6, and black has the only choice left is to castle on the king side. Afterwards, white will just simply drop that bishop back and emerge with a clear piece up. If at this point knight captures e5, then white will capture this knight, and after black recapture with the pawn, white has a sneaky move, that is queen to h5. So hitting the two soft spot, and black cannot defend both of them. So in this variation, let's say after black plays g6 to save the mate, white queen will simply snap up the e5 pawn and at least remain a pawn up. So that means bishop e7 is also prohibited. You might think moves such as h6 will stop any tricks by white, but witness yourself, because once again white is going to capture the e pawn, and black capture with the knight, then white will capture this knight, and after black recapture, we have this bishop captures f7, and at least white will gain a pawn in this variation. So very obvious is at this point black has to capture with the pawn, so d captures e5, and now white has this amazing piece sacrifice, that is bishop captures f7. King to e7 looks hopeless, so black has to accept this sacrifice, and after this white has this knight check. Now please note this knight is pinned, so that means black has only few options left with the king, and all of them leads to a quick checkmate by white. So let's see all of them. First move, if king to e7, then knight to g6 will gain at least a rook. If the king goes to the e8 square, then queen to h5 is a deadly check, and that means the black king will be on the dance floor. So a sample line run like this, so king to e7 and then queen to f7, and the dance begin with king to d6, and we have some moves like this. Afterwards black king will be checkmated. After king to e6, queen to d5 check, and king to f6 leads to a very fast checkmate. So we should see this move. So here white will continue with queen check, and after black recapture, bishop check, and king to d4 and queen to d5 as a checkmate. Last but not least, black has the move king to f6. Afterwards, it doesn't look like white has anything concrete, but believe it or not, white has a sneaky developing move, which create a big problem to the black king, and that is the move knight to c3. Here two moves has been tried. If black plays bishop to b4, pinning that knight, then white can play the move queen to d4, and not only white is threatening the bishop, but white is also threatening to give a discover check to the black king. So a simple line can run like this. So bishop captures c3, and after b captures c3, the best move suggested by Fritz is queen to e8. Afterwards white can simply snap up that knight, and not only white regain the piece, but white has attack to boot. In the second line, black greedily captured that piece, so king captures e5. I got this position in one of my game, and I must admit I was enjoying the black king dance. So here I continue with the move queen to d5 check, and after king to f6, queen to f5 check, and after king to e7, knight to d5 check occurs. And following moves are like this. So my opponent king run like a hell, but after a few moves like this, I made the checkmate. The final move we have is the move c6, but here white can again continue with the move d captures e5, and black has to play d captures e5, because if black captures with the knight, then the familiar trick happens, which is knight captures knight, and after d captures e5, we have a lovely bishop cross f7. Here, instead of immediately capturing the knight, if your opponent try to be smart with the queen check, so queen to a5 check, then white can continue with the move knight to c3, and after d captures e5, white can develop all of his pieces, starting with the move queen to h5. So threatening on f7, and a simple line can run like this. So after g6, queen to f3, which are once again renewing the threat to f7. So that more or less forced black to play queen to c7. Afterwards, white can play the move bishop to g5. And you can already see, although material is balanced, white has almost developed all of his pieces, and white has a flexibility of castling which side. So that means knight captures e5 is prohibited. That leads to the only move left, that is d captures e5. Here white will continue with the move knight to g5, attacking f7. So knight h6 is forced, and now white will castle on the king side. And at first sight it looks like bishop to e7 is a very obvious move, because it's hitting the knight, and also black is one step away from the castle. Well, all looks good and rosy for black, except white next move, that is knight to e6. Bam! So hitting the queen, hitting the g7, and I think some of the good top players, including Anand, get this position. Lucky them. So black response is forced. Black has to accept this piece sacrifice. Afterwards, white will continue with the move bishop captures h6, and black cannot capture this piece. If black captures the bishop, then after queen check and king to f8, white has this move bishop captures e6, which leads to the checkmate on f7. And the only way to defend the checkmate is via queen to e8, but queen captures h6, and this is a checkmate. And many people has fallen into this one. Even though, let's say after bishop captures h6, if your opponent doesn't capture this bishop and played a strong move, that is knight to b6, white will continue here with the move queen to h5 check, and both the move king to f8 and king to d7 can be successfully made by f4 and rook to d1. So the only good move left is g6, and afterwards white will just drop this queen back to the e2. And although if you look at the position carefully, the material is balanced, white has this wonderful bishop sitting on h6, with stopping black to castle on the king side, and black has this horrible double pawns, and that is more than enough compensation to win the game. So those are some of the wonderful tricks exist in knight to d7 variation. Now let's look at some of the tricks exist in the move f5, which is known as Philidor counter gambit. After the move f5, it's not advisable for white to taking either of the pawns. Instead of this, white should continue with the move bishop to c4. And again, the ball is back into the black's court, because if black is going to capture either of the pawn, then there are some nasty tricks waiting to be hit. So let's see them. First obvious looking move is f captures e4, which has a merit of hitting the knight. And here white has this amazing piece sacrifice, that is knight captures e5. No matter how black react, for example whether black capture the knight or push forward, it all leads to a bad position to the black. If pawn captures knight, then after this queen check, black is in a great difficulties, because the simple looking move g6 can lose a rook in the corner, so that's not possible. And if the king goes to the e7, then after queen captures e5, white queen is asking black, where are you going, sweetie? And after king to d7, queen to e6 will simply trap the black sweetie, so that's not good either. The last move, king to d7, will allow black king to come to the dance floor once again after queen to f5 check. I got this position in one of my game, and the game continues like this. So after king to c6, I simply capture the e-pawn, and now there are so many threats are looming. So the first threat is queen to b5. I can also capture this e-pawn. There's also threat of bishop to f4. So all in all, after long thinking, my opponent responded over here with the move a6. But after this, the task become very easy for me. So game continues like this. I give him this d5 check, and after king to b6, I just give this another bishop e3 check. And after few moves like this, I made him the checkmate. So that means at this position, pawn captures e5 is not good. If black plays the move d5, then after once again queen check and g6, white will simply capture that pawn. And the edge pawn is pinned, so black cannot capture the knight, and white is threatening to capture the rook. That means black response is pretty much forced. Black has to play first of all knight to f6, hitting the queen, and here white will continue with the move queen to e5 check. And no matter how black plays this position, white will have a winning continuation after all the fireworks. So let's see them. After bishop to b7, knight captures bishop and queen captures knight. Here white has this move bishop to g4, and two continuation has been tried. In the first move, white captured the queen, but after very simple d captures e5, hitting the knight, and if the knight moves, then the d5 pawn drops, so black has to forcefully accept this bishop, and after white will gain the knight. And after this, not only white is a clear pawn up, but black's king side pawn are shattered. Instead of this, if black capture the bishop, so d captures c4, then after very simple bishop captures f6, hitting the rook and hitting the queen, black has to forcefully accept the queen trade, and after this, once again white emerge with a clear pawn up, and black's king position is shattered. So all in all, f captures e4, it's not advisable. In this position, if black plays e captures d4, then white should continue with the move knight to g5, looking at the f7. So black response is forced. Black has to play knight to h6. Afterwards, white will simply castle on the king side. And here two moves has been tried. Both leads to wonderful tricks, so we should see them. In the first move, black plays bishop to e7. Afterwards, white has this lethal check, that is queen to h5, and g6 is not possible because queen captures h6 and white gain a valuable piece. So that means king has to come to the f8. Afterwards, knight to f7 will fork major pieces. So only way to come out is moving the queen. So let's say queen goes to the d8. Afterwards, white has this amazing shot, bishop captures h6, and black cannot capture this, and that means white will emerge with a clearly superior position. Now instead of bishop to e7, if white goes for the pawn hunt, so f captures e4, then white can play this tricky move rook to e1. And once again, two moves has been tried. In first variation, black plays the move e3, so queen is hitting the knight. Here white should ignore this and sacrifice the knight with a very amazing initiative. So here white will continue with the move queen captures d4, and after queen captures g5, white will take this pawn with the bishop. Position is very dangerous for black, because not only this bishop is hitting the queen, but once this bishop moves, then there will be a discover attack to the black king. In this game, black continue with the move queen to g4, but after bishop to g5, black king doesn't survive longer. So let me show you the rest of the moves very quickly. Black plays king to d7. Afterwards, white play a strong but very effective move king to e3. So going for the mate idea, in the game black plays this c5, but that doesn't stop the mate, because after queen to d8 and king to c7, bishop to d8 is a checkmate. Instead of e3, if black plays the move d5, then once again white can sacrifice a piece via knight captures e4. And no matter how black recapture, black has the lost position. So let's see, if d captures c4, then after queen check, one of my opponent blocked this check with the knight, but to his horror, he found out that knight to f6 is a checkmate. So that is wonderful, right? Instead of this, if d captures e4, then white can throw this check with rook captures e4, and after bishop to e7, first white will rip open the king side via bishop captures h6, and after g captures h6, once again our old friend, that is queen to h5 check. The only move left is king to d7. Afterwards, rook captures d4 will finish black off. So here black doesn't have any option. Black has to play bishop to d6. Afterwards, queen to f5 check, king to e7, white just checkmate the black king on the f7. So those are some of the wonderful